Marcus slid his untouched plate to the edge of the table, angling his body so the restaurant's dim lighting would hide the gesture from anyone watching. Across from him, Sophie, 7 years old, looked down at the grilled cheese sandwich and tomato soup set before her. Items carefully chosen because they cost less than anything else on the menu. Her small fingers reached for the sandwich slowly, hesitantly, as if she'd learned long ago that good things required permission. Marcus cut into his own chicken breast, brought the fork to his mouth without eating, then set it back down. He repeated this twice mechanically so the server wouldn't notice. Sophie's eyes tracked his movements. He smiled at her, the kind of smile that hurt a little, then looked away. 3 years of doing this. 3 years since Jennifer left, since the promotion Marcus had believed would change everything turned into the promotion that came with a pay cut when the company restructured. He'd kept the job anyway because leaving meant 6 weeks without health insurance, and Sophie needed her inhaler. The pediatrician didn't accept excuses. Now he worked doubles at the warehouse 4 nights a week, picked Sophie up from after-school care at 6, and brought her here to Mara's diner because the early bird special, 2 kids' meals for $8, was the only way dinner happened without eating into rent money. Some nights Marcus ate before picking her up, a granola bar in his car while he waited in the parking lot. Other nights, like tonight, he didn't eat at all. Sophie had learned not to ask why his plate always came back nearly full. "It's good," he asked her, watching her chew the sandwich. "Really good, Dad," she said, and he knew she meant it because Sophie didn't lie. She never had. Even when lying would have been easier, she told the truth in that clear, small voice that sometimes made Marcus want to pull the car over and cry. The waitress was new, someone Marcus hadn't seen in the 3 months of weekly visits to Mara's. She was older, maybe late 50s, with silver streaks threaded through her dark hair and the kind of posture that came from standing on your feet for decades. She moved with an economy of motion that Marcus recognized. No wasted steps, no wasted energy. She'd cleared tables at places like this before, probably for a long time. When she reached his table to refill water glasses, she paused. Her eyes went from Marcus's plate to Sophie's half-empty bowl, then back to Marcus's face. She said nothing, just refilled and moved on. 20 minutes later, Sophie had finished. Marcus paid the check, $12.30, which included a small tip, and they stood to leave. The new waitress intercepted them by the register, her hand touching his shoulder lightly. "Come back tomorrow night," she said quietly. "Same time, sit in booth 6. Marcus didn't understand the request well enough to refuse it, so he nodded and left. The next evening, Sophie wore her favorite shirt, the blue one with the small stain on the collar that wouldn't wash out. She chatted the entire drive to Mara's about something her friend Maya had said at school, and Marcus let her voice fill the space between them, grateful for the distraction. When they entered, booth 6 was waiting, and on the table, already set, were 2 full plates of food. Chicken, potatoes, vegetables, not kids' meals, full meals. "I don't," Marcus started, but the waitress was already moving away, distributing menus to other tables with the same efficient movements. "We can't accept this," Marcus called after her, but quietly, not wanting to make a scene that Sophie would remember. The waitress didn't turn around. She just raised one hand in a motion that meant, "Sit down, eat, stop arguing." Sophie had already slid into the booth. Marcus sat across from her, his chest tight with a sensation he couldn't quite name. Gratitude, maybe, but also something else, something like shame, like exposure. This woman had looked at him, truly looked, and seen exactly what he'd been hiding, not just from Sophie, but from everyone. The pretense of the full plate set down and not eaten. The calculation of every transaction, the weight of never being able to do enough. "Why is she being nice to us?" Sophie asked, her fork already in her hand. "I don't know," Marcus said, and that was the truth. He picked up his fork. This time he cut into the chicken and actually ate it. The meat was tender, seasoned with herbs he couldn't identify. It tasted like something that had been made with care. Across the table, Sophie ate steadily, without the rushed urgency of a child who'd learned to eat quickly before the food disappeared. She was simply eating dinner, a normal thing, a thing children should be able to do without it meaning something terrible about the world. When the check came, there was no number on it. Just a napkin folded underneath the plate, the kind of napkin restaurants used for spills. Marcus unfolded it carefully as if it might break. The handwriting was precise, careful. "Same time tomorrow. This is my job." Marcus read it 3 times. He looked toward the kitchen, trying to catch sight of the waitress, but she disappeared into the back. He folded the napkin back up, placed it in his pocket, and looked at Sophie. "Did you like dinner?" he asked. "It was really good," Sophie said. "Can we come back?" "Yeah," Marcus said. "Yeah, we can." In his pocket, the napkin felt heavier than it should have been, as if it contained something more than words. The napkin stayed in Marcus's pocket for 2 days before he washed it by accident, along with his work pants. He didn't retrieve it from the dryer. The words were already memorized. By Friday of that week, they were back at booth 6, and the Friday after that. The waitress, her name tag read Elena, seemed to expect them. She'd have the booth ready before they arrived, and by 6:15 the same kind of full plates would appear. Not the same meal every time. Sometimes it was meatloaf and mashed potatoes. Once it was fish, which Sophie initially refused, but then tried at Marcus's quiet encouragement and found she liked. The variations told Marcus that Elena was thinking about it, planning, not just mechanically delivering leftovers or cheap food. This was deliberate. "Her daughter likes fish too," Sophie said one evening, matter of fact, as she ate. Marcus looked up. "How do you know that?" "She told me when you were in the bathroom." Marcus set down his fork. "What else did she tell you?" Sophie shrugged, the gesture of a child for whom adult conversations held only mild interest. "That she used to cook a lot, for her family, that she likes to cook." That was the first real information Marcus had about Elena. She wore her hair tied back tightly, pulled so close to her scalp that it made her face look severe, but her hands, when they delivered plates, were gentle. She never lingered at their table, never imposed conversation, but she always checked on them twice during the meal. Once to ensure Sophie had everything she needed, once to watch Marcus actually eat. Her gaze, when it landed on him, was specific, clinical almost, as if she were verifying something. 3 weeks into the pattern, Marcus arrived early and sat at the counter instead of waiting for booth 6. He watched Elena work. She moved through her station with the precision of someone who'd done this for decades, but there was something else in her movements too, a kind of stillness underneath the activity, as if part of her was always somewhere else. She spoke to customers only when necessary. The other servers, younger women with agile bodies and bright voices, seemed to exist in a different dimension entirely. Elena occupied her own space, separate. When she brought him water, Marcus spoke. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. Elena didn't pause or pretend not to understand. "Doing what?" "Feeding us. Us specifically. You don't know us." "No," Elena agreed. "I don't." She turned to leave and Marcus reached out, not grabbing, just a small gesture that made her stop. "My daughter asked about your family," he said. Elena's jaw tightened. Her hands, which had been moving, stilled completely. For a moment Marcus thought she might walk away without responding. Then she sat down across from him in the stool on the other side of the counter, an action that seemed to cost her something. "I have a daughter," Elena said. "Had. She's 32 now. Lives in Portland. I see her twice a year." Elena's fingers pressed flat against the counter, as if anchoring herself. "When she was your daughter's age, I worked here. Different restaurant, same job. My ex-husband drank. He drank a lot. Some months there wasn't enough money for food. My daughter would go to school hungry, and I'd come here and eat what the cook left over, and I'd tell her I'd already eaten at home." Marcus didn't move. "One day my manager noticed," Elena continued. "Old man named Carl. He started giving me extra food. Meals, he said, didn't sell. My daughter ate. That's the only reason my daughter's memories from that time aren't all about hunger." Elena looked at him directly. "Carl never told me why. I was too ashamed to ask. But he did it anyway." She stood up. A customer at table 3 needed refills, and Elena moved toward them with her usual efficiency. That night, after they'd eaten and paid, Marcus still insisted on paying, though the meals probably cost Elena more than she received. He lingered at the register. When Elena came out from the back, he placed an envelope on the counter. "No," Elena said immediately. "I haven't opened the restaurant yet," Marcus said. "I mean, I haven't told you what it is. I don't take money." "It's not money." Inside the envelope were 2 photographs. Marcus had gone home after their dinner, gone to the filing cabinet in the bedroom he shared with absolutely nothing else, and found them. They were from last summer. Sophie at the community pool, laughing with her head thrown back. Sophie building something with blocks at a library program. The kind of photographs a parent keeps because they capture the exact specific angle of their child's joy. Elena opened the envelope slowly. Her hands trembled slightly as she looked at the photos. "For your office," Marcus said. "Or somewhere you like. Just so you see her, Sophie. So you know it's not abstract for us. It's real." Eleanor's eyes moved over Sophie's face in the photographs. Her breathing had changed. She pressed the envelope gently against her chest. "My daughter," she said so quietly Marcus almost didn't hear. "She's your daughter's age in the last photo I have of her. The last real one, I mean. Not a school picture. From before everything." Elena's fingers traced Sophie's smiling face. "She looked like this. Just like this. So sure the world was good." "What happened?" Marcus asked. Elena didn't answer directly. Instead, she tucked the photographs back into the envelope and held it like something precious, something that might break. "I couldn't save her from everything," Elena said finally. "But I could feed her. That was something I could control." She looked at Marcus. "Now I see that little girl sit in my booth, and I think about my daughter at that age, and I think about Carl, and I feed her because—" Eleanor's voice tightened. "Because someone did that for me once." Marcus realized then that the dinners had never been about Sophie. They'd been about Elena. A second chance at something she couldn't undo, a way to parent forward into the future, what she couldn't change in the past. "She knows your daughter was kind," Marcus said. "Sophie told me. She remembers Elena asked her questions. She thinks you're good." Eleanor's face folded inward slightly as if struck. She held the envelope tighter and turned toward the kitchen without responding. But her shoulders were different now, less rigid, carrying something new. Marcus and Sophie would be back tomorrow. On a Tuesday in March, Marcus arrived at Mara's and immediately sensed something was wrong. The manager, a man named Don, who rarely left the back office, was standing near booth 6. His expression was the kind that preceded terminations. Elena was loading a bus tray with controlled, deliberate movements, her jaw set in that familiar tight line. Don saw Marcus and Sophie and gestured them toward the counter instead of their usual booth. "Sit here," he said. Not unkind, just directive. Marcus mouthed a question at Elena over the counter, but she wouldn't meet his eyes. She continued clearing tables with mechanical precision, moving through the restaurant like she was already gone. Sophie climbed onto a counter stool, confused by the deviation from routine. Marcus ordered their usual, grilled cheese and tomato soup for Sophie, chicken breast and vegetables for himself, and waited. Don disappeared back into his office. For 15 minutes, nothing happened. Eleanor moved through her shift. Other customers ate and left, and then Don emerged with a folder along with another man Marcus didn't recognize. The man had a corporate bearing, polo shirt with a company logo, tablet under his arm. He was doing an audit, Marcus later learned, inventory audit. And in the 3 weeks he'd been reviewing Mara's financial records, he'd noticed a discrepancy. Food cost ratio was off. Small amounts but consistent, appearing in the logs 3 or 4 times weekly, always during Elena's shifts. Don had been gentle about it at first, Elena told Marcus later, asked if she knew anything about it. Elena had simply said yes and explained exactly what she'd been doing. Taking prepared meals that were approaching their time limit, portions of dishes returned untouched, the occasional fresh plate specially made, nothing stolen in the traditional sense, but nothing authorized either. "You can't do this," Don said, not angry so much as tired. He'd been managing restaurants for 20 years, he'd seen everything. The corporate auditor looked at the numbers, then at Elena, then at Marcus and Sophie sitting at the counter. He said nothing, but his expression was already measuring the liability versus the minimal loss, the loss versus the publicity if a fired employee decided to make noise about feeding a hungry child. "She has to stop," Don said to Marcus directly, which was when Marcus realized this had become his problem too. "Whatever this is, it stops now. I like Elena. I do. But I can't have employees giving away product. The company finds out. I find out anyway. I'm done here. 40 years, I'm done." Eleanor emerged from the kitchen. She'd changed out of her uniform and into street clothes, moving like someone leaving a place she'd occupied but never quite inhabited. She picked up her coat. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, standing quickly. "Don't do this. I'll figure something else out. I didn't ask for—" "I know," Elena said. She pulled on her coat. "You didn't." But as she moved toward the door, Sophie reached out. Not dramatically, just a child's small hand extending across the counter. Sophie was holding something, the photograph of herself, laughing at the pool, the one Elena had kept. You can keep it, Sophie said. I have more at home. Eleanor stopped. She looked at the photograph in Sophie's hand, then at the child offering it, then at Marcus. Her hand moved forward and took the picture gently. She folded it and placed it in her coat pocket, her fingers lingering there for a moment. I'll be okay, Elena said to Sophie specifically. You don't need to worry about me. Then she left. Marcus sat back down slowly. The auditor was on his tablet making notes. Don returned to his office. Sophie's soup arrived, and Marcus cut her grilled cheese into triangles the way she liked, though his hands felt distant from his body, performing functions he'd learned so long ago they'd become automatic. That evening, after dropping Sophie at the sitter's apartment, Marcus drove to an address Elena had given him weeks ago, not directly but in conversation about something else. A bus stop she always mentioned, a corner. Marcus had pieced together the neighborhood, and from there he found her building. 4 stories, brick facade, the kind of place where rent was cheap and questions weren't asked. He didn't know what he would say, didn't have a plan, but he climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor anyway and knocked on the door marked 3F. Eleanor answered in a cardigan and jeans, her hair down for the first time Marcus had seen it, making her face look younger and older simultaneously. Behind her, the apartment was small but fastidious, everything in its place, minimal decoration, the kind of space built by someone who'd learned that sparse meant safe. I'm going to talk to Don, Marcus said immediately. I'll tell him it was my idea. I'll say I asked you specifically, I pressured you, No, Elena said. Then I'll pay for it, everything. I'll work out a repayment plan. However long it takes, Marcus, stop! Elena stepped back, gesturing him inside. The apartment smelled like coffee and something else, something like old paper or books. Sit down. He sat on a small couch that faced a window overlooking the street. Elena disappeared briefly and returned with 2 mugs of coffee, one of which she pressed into his hands. I called my daughter, Elena said. She sat beside him, not facing him directly, just looking out the window. This morning after I left the restaurant. Marcus didn't respond. He waited. I told her about Sophie, about what I'd been doing. I told her why. Eleanor's fingers wrapped around her mug. She said something I wasn't expecting. She said, Mom, why are you still punishing yourself? And I didn't have a good answer. Outside, the street was filling with evening traffic. Cars, people walking, the ordinary machinery of a Tuesday ending. Carl saved me, Elena continued. And I saved myself by saving someone else. But saving someone else was supposed to fix what was broken in me. And it doesn't work that way. That's not how healing works. She turned toward Marcus. I know why Don is upset. I know why the company is upset. I broke the rules and I'll accept that, but I'm not going to let you take that responsibility. It's mine. What will you do? Marcus asked. I'll find another job, Elena said. There are other restaurants. There's always another restaurant. She paused. But I want you to do something for me. Anything. Don't feel guilty. Not about this. Not about taking help when it was offered. Elena's voice had the quality of something she'd been preparing to say for a long time. My daughter is struggling. She's been struggling for years with things I caused and things I couldn't prevent and things that just happen. But one of the things that helped her survive was knowing that someone thought she was worth feeding, that someone looked at her and decided she mattered. Elena looked directly at Marcus. That matters more than a job. That matters more than inventory discrepancies. Marcus set his coffee down. I need to pay you back somehow. You're not, Elena said. This isn't a transaction. This is a debt I'm repaying to someone who helped me 30 years ago. She stood and walked to a shelf near the kitchen. She pulled down a small framed photograph. Not professional, just a snapshot. A young woman, darker haired than Elena, but with the same set to her mouth, standing in front of a bridge. Portland, the Columbia River Bridge, likely. That's my daughter, Elena said. That's who this was for. Not just Sophie, but also for her. For the little girl in that photo I have of her. The one that stopped at age 7 because I couldn't protect her from everything. Eleanor placed the photograph on the coffee table between them. Carl did that for me. Now I'm doing it for you. Now maybe Sophie grows up knowing the world has people in it who see her and act. Marcus looked at the photograph, then at Elena. I'm calling you tomorrow, he said. I don't know what I'm going to say yet, but I'm calling. Whatever Don decides, whatever the company decides, that's not the end of this. Eleanor nodded slowly, and for the first time since Marcus had known her, she smiled. A small thing, tentative, but real. Don called Marcus at work the following Friday. Marcus was stacking boxes in the warehouse. his shift half finished when his supervisor tapped his shoulder and pointed to the office phone. He knew before picking up that it was about Elena. He knew because he'd been expecting it, had spent 5 days preparing for either outcome. "I'm offering her her job back," Don said without preamble. "Different terms. She'll work with me on inventory practices. The auditor is gone. The company isn't pressing anything. But Marcus, this is between us, you understand? This doesn't become a story." Marcus understood. He said thank you and hung up. He texted Elena immediately. Don called. "You have your job if you want it." She didn't respond for 3 hours. When she did, the message was simple. "I do." By Monday, Elena was back at Mara's, but the Booth 6 pattern didn't resume automatically. Marcus and Sophie came in on Tuesday evening, their standing night now, their reliability, and Elena seated them at the counter instead. She didn't deliver a full plate to Marcus. She brought what he'd ordered, nothing more. Sophie's meal came as requested, nothing extra. They ate in a different configuration, facing forward toward the kitchen rather than toward each other across a table. For 2 weeks, this was the rhythm. Sophie asked quietly why they were sitting at the counter now, and Marcus told her the truth, because Elena's rules had changed, and they were respecting that. Sophie accepted this the way children accept shifts in the world, as new information to be catalogued and incorporated. Then on a Tuesday in April, as Marcus was settling the check, Elena placed a small card beside his coffee mug, not a napkin this time. An actual card, cream-colored, with writing inside. "My daughter is visiting Portland. She's driving down this weekend. She wants to meet you and Sophie. She asked if you'd come to breakfast my day off. She said I've talked about you enough that she feels like she knows you." And below the address, a handwritten note. "She made a decision. She's going to therapy. She said something changed when I told her about all of this. I don't know what you did exactly, but thank you." Marcus read it twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in his wallet, next to the 2 photographs that had returned to him weeks ago. Not the originals, but copies Elena had made at a drugstore. She'd kept the originals. Saturday morning, they drove to the address Elena had provided. It was a small house with a porch and a garden, in various states of spring growth. Elena answered the door in clothes that weren't her waitress uniform. A simple dress, her hair down, her face arranged in an expression Marcus had never quite seen before, nervous and open simultaneously. Elena's daughter, Catherine, was waiting inside. She was 32, but carried herself like someone still learning how to be present in her own life. She had Elena's mouth and her own particular way of moving, careful, measured. Sophie, with the directness of children, walked directly to her and asked, "Are you Elena's daughter?" "I am," Catherine said, and smiled at Sophie in a way that made her look suddenly younger. "And you're Sophie. Your picture is in my mum's apartment. Did you know that?" Sophie shook her head. "It's on the shelf next to my photo," Catherine said, "so we keep each other company." Elena had made breakfast. Waffles, bacon, fresh fruit, the kind of meal that required planning and actual groceries purchased in advance. As they ate, Catherine and Marcus talked about small things, his work, her work, the weather, the neighborhood. But underneath the conversation was a different current. Catherine was studying Marcus in a way that suggested she was trying to understand what her mother had seen in him and his daughter, what had broken the particular spell Elena had been under. Halfway through the meal, Catherine reached into her bag and pulled out a small leather journal, worn and creased with use. "I want to show you something," Catherine said to Marcus. "Not to make you uncomfortable, just so you understand what my mother is." She opened to a page dated 15 years ago. The handwriting was Eleanor's, but younger looking, less controlled. The entry was short. "I failed her. That's the only story. I failed, and there's no making it right. I will spend the rest of my life failing in smaller ways to compensate for that one large failure." Catherine turned to another page, dated last month. "I watched a man today who is doing everything right and still it's not enough. And I recognized myself, not in his failure, but in his effort, in his refusal to stop trying. Maybe that's what I've been missing. Not absolution, just continuity. The understanding that trying again tomorrow means something, even if I can't fix yesterday." "She wrote this after she met you," Catherine said to Marcus, "after your second visit to her apartment." Eleanor was watching from the kitchen, her hands busy with nothing in particular. "I want you to know," Catherine continued, "that I'm angry with my mother still, about some things. But I'm also starting to understand that she was drowning too, and that watching you hold your daughter, Actually hold her, not just keep her alive, that mattered to her. It reminded her that drowning people can still reach out. Marcus didn't know what to say. He looked at Sophie, who was eating waffles and watching the adults with the vague interest of a child, performing her role in something larger than herself. Then he looked at Elena. She'd returned to the table and was sitting beside Catherine, her hand resting lightly on her daughter's shoulder, a gesture that seemed both tentative and permanent. "I'm going to keep coming to the diner," Marcus said, "Sophie and I, because we like being there, because Elena is good at her job and Sophie likes her coffeeless hot chocolate. That's it. That's all I need it to be." Elena nodded. Catherine smiled. They finished breakfast. Before leaving, Sophie hugged Elena, a small, uncomplicated embrace that lasted 3 seconds, and Elena hugged back without hesitation. In the car driving home, Sophie fell asleep with her forehead against the window, and Marcus thought about cycles. The way Elena had been saved by Carl had saved Sophie and Marcus in turn, and in doing so had begun saving herself. Not healed, but moving, continuing forward in a way that looked less like drowning and more like swimming. 3 months later, Marcus received a promotion. Actual advancement this time, with real increases in pay. He didn't celebrate it the way he might have imagined he would. Instead, he took the promotion letter and Sophie to Mara's, and he and Elena sat in the kitchen during her break and looked at it together. "You should raise your prices," Elena said practically. "I should take you to dinner," Marcus said. "All 3 of us. Somewhere actual where you're not working." Elena considered this. "Okay," she said, "but I want to cook for you first. I want to make something." It was a small thing, but it meant she was no longer locked in a single story about who she was and what she could offer. She was, perhaps for the first time since Carl had helped her daughter, imagining a future where generosity flowed in multiple directions. Sophie, sitting between them, looked up and asked, "Are we friends now?" Eleanor and Marcus exchanged glances. Neither of them had used that word before, but Elena reached down and squeezed Sophie's hand and said, "Yeah, I think we are." Some circles, it turned out, were meant to be completed.